All right, hello and welcome to another Cavell Cloud Conversations podcast, the first of 2025. It's freezing in the UK. We're both wearing hoodies. It is cold. Patrick is snowed in, and I am mildly cold. In fact, actually, I'm not that cold at all. I've got, the house is just fine, whereas he's like minus 10 degrees and I'm like one. So I'm all good, actually. I'm on a summer holiday. I'm basically roasting, and Patrick is freezing his toes off.
Well, I mean, we are wearing at least Cavell branded hoodies.
That is true.
And they are
yeah.
they are warm. But you're right. It is. I'm in the northern office in the UK, our remote office, and it is cold. So yeah, it's cold start to the year, but we wouldn't expect anything less.
But you know what isn't cold? Tech sector in 2025.
Like, very good point.
If we're talking about weather contrasting with what's going on in our lives, we're already kind of blazing into 2025 with a very warm, nay, fiery reception. The amount of work that has to get done and the predictions and things that people are saying is going to happen this year. What's your top prediction for 2025, Patrick? Let's go straight in there.
Well, actually, I think I'm going to be led by our enterprise research, which you head up, Finbarr. And I think we are seeing, and I think we've heard it anecdotally as well from a lot of the customers that we've spoken to and vendors and technology providers. And it's a bit of a pushback from sort of pure public cloud. I think we've seen increasing movements towards hybrid solutions on the UC side, and you will probably talk about the contact center side, but I think on the UC side, we're going to see a lot more pushback towards potential hybrid cloud models and different deployment methods out of just side pure public multi-tenant hosted cloud. And I think there's lots of interesting news in the space. I think although we're still forecasting really heavy growth within cloud communications, I think we are going to see much more of a composite of enterprises, particularly looking to leverage some premises-based assets, at least maybe for some of their most critical communication services.
I think, yeah, I definitely agree. And I think the context that kind of is leading to this choice is kind of multi-layered and very interesting. So companies obviously want that benefit from cloud, which they've wanted for years, and they've adopted their cloud solutions and embraced it. And then you've got this counter tide of regulation, security concerns, fraud, data sovereignty coming in. And a lot of companies are then turning and saying, well, okay, I'm happy for this service to run in the cloud and that service to run in the cloud, but this one, the call recording or the customer data storage, has to be on the private on-prem or on the data center. And when we were talking about it earlier this week, we were talking about blue light services in some countries in Europe and their need for a non-publicly hosted, foreign hosted data center, because it's so much easier to get emergency power to a data center you control that's in country. If something happens with your national grid, it's so much easier to guarantee and secure a service that happens in your local area. So while the public sector is looking at that, the private sector is also looking at that and saying, hey, should we be doing this? And then when you add in the network costs and the traffic costs of actually routing tons of data and the speed and the latency that comes in when you're trying to route tons of data over the internet, there's a lot of new AI focused use cases that make sense to do as close to the edge as possible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I spoke to a video conferencing provider at the start of the year, and they've actually had a couple of really big wins against some of the US over-the-top providers of collaborative UCaaS solutions. And that actually, interestingly, they told me that the primary driver for those was cost transparency. So over a 5-year period, it was much easier for these, and these were very large deployments across Asia, and they were much more interested in the transparency of costs in terms of buying a system that they can deploy locally in their Taiwanese data centers for up to 5,000 users, rather than deploying 2,000 users on a SaaS solution on monthly recurring revenue and gradually increasing that and not knowing what the full costs were going to be as they added additional services on. So I think, as well as all of the security compliance, and as you said, I think critical data components, more and more people are going to look to keep locally. But I think also from a price point of view, we might even see a bit of kickback there in terms of just that price transparency of on-prem solutions as well.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because obviously we return to the old model of purchase asset, sweat asset with a fixed
Exactly.
cost. And that only really works when the asset has like a tangible shelf life and doesn't become obsolete.
Yeah,
So
very good point. Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
because we were talking about kind of like phases in the industry with someone on the phone earlier this week. And we were kind of talking about, this is my prediction for the year, by the way, which is that security is going to become massively more
Yeah.
relevant in every area of comms again, both in terms of preventing fraud, but also maintaining security of the calls and the data that's happening there. Because the last thing you want is for the data of a conversation to be shared too freely or go to the wrong provider and then give them data they're not supposed to have, or to let someone into a call who looks like the person they're supposed to be, but isn't because of the quality of AI impersonation. And we've heard that that is becoming, higher on the agenda again, because you think you solve it, but then they find a new way of getting into the system. But the reason I brought that up now, aside from just being my prediction contribution, is that we're in those phases where we have a stable period where security is not the priority, but understood. And then we also have a period where the technology is changing too fast for companies to feel comfortable buying an on-prem box, because we move into cloud where things are very aggressive and you want the latest update, you want it to be pushed, you don't want to have to manage it. And then we move into a stable period where the technology has reached a plateau and you feel more comfortable mixing in a bit of on-prem with a bit of cloud. Not that we think cloud is going anywhere or anything like that. The prediction is not cloud will fall. The prediction is someone might look at their whole tech stack and be like, yeah, but I want that box in this room, in this environment. And the rest of it will still be operating cloud globally,
Yeah. I completely agree. And to your point initially, I think a lot of organizations realize that to get a lot of benefits of modern technology, that it has to be in some form of the new feature sets, as you said, on a regularly iterative basis without constantly having to upgrade your own solution. The only way to do that is with the public cloud. But as you said, I think sensitive workloads and your point on security, I think is absolutely valid. And again, we've seen that in our enterprise research, more and more businesses saying that security is going to be, I think that the piece with security that's really interesting, I think your phases of what's happening within the communication sector is really relevant, is because for a long time, definitely for a few years, security was definitely on the back burner, as it was considered almost sort of table stakes within. And if we look at a sort of UC or a collaboration platform, it was just considered that they were inherently secure. But I think there are additional questions being asked now, and whether that creates a sort of subset market for new security solutions or more enhanced security capabilities within. What does that look like for a UCaaS provider? What does that look like for a collaboration provider? But you're right. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, because it's a multi-layered problem. So if someone with your voice, like replicated through AI, calls up your bank pretending to be you, then that's one thing, because they have all the traditional security questions, and hopefully that person has not hacked your details and all those kind of things. And if they have enough information to impersonate you, a lot of the time it's not going to matter if they have your exact voice, right?
Yeah.
They'll just be able to get into your details because they know when your mother was born and all that kind of stuff. But in the situations where voice is the authenticator, which is something I've just come up with, but it sounds correct. Yeah. But for instance, if I call you on the phone, right? Yeah. If I call you on the phone within our business, you would not expect someone who sounds like me to not be me. Now, you would, because we always put video on and we are a video first company. And that's one way that process wise you can handle this sort of problem. But there's also video, editing software and stuff like that as well. Yeah. So in this sort of situation, the only real check on whether you give me sensitive information that I shouldn't have is, do you recognize that I'm not me and I'm someone pretending to be me? And there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of those sort of occurrences happening every day. And I'm not going to ask you to do something like give me a gift card for Amazon or something like that. I'm going to ask you for something that seems fairly benign, but gets me access to company data or something, behind the veil that I'm not supposed to have access to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's a new series of threats effectively, and
exactly
that organizations are facing within the space.
But the point is that like verification beyond just the biometrics of voice, appearance, then become more relevant. And when we were talking to one provider earlier this week, they were talking about using IP address triangulation. They were talking about using location-based triangulation, figure out where people are calling from, and then if the same number calls you with six different, the same number calls you from the same IP address, but with six different names and faces and queries, then that there's fraud going on. So there's always other back-end systems that are being brought into play to tackle the rise of AI-powered fraud, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And I'm really interested to see, and I know we've got a number of people speaking to us at the moment about where within their portfolio they might be a UC vendor, they might be a contact center vendor, where they should be focusing particularly on security. And I think that's the real question. And it comes back often from that enterprise research, is that what do businesses expect? Ultimately, they expect the platforms to be secure, but often it's the gaps and the integrations and the knitting of the platforms together where the weaknesses are. So does that again go back to another one of our sort of predictions for the year? And I know that's one that Matt Townend, our exec director, is looking into a lot at the moment, is the sort of rise of the managed service provider. Someone that can oversee your entire technology estate across large parts of communications and IT, and therefore have better visualization of those potential security gaps between what primarily the collaboration systems, the UC systems, the contact center systems are generally inherently very secure systems. It's, as you said, maybe the sort of gaps and the links in between that are the gaps. So maybe someone who's overseeing that, the rise for that will increase even more.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, and integrations are just ever continuing to rise. I mean, even huge companies take on integrations. I was reading yesterday about that Salesforce and Amazon Connect deal, huge CRM partnering with huge CCaaS provider. And it's going to be a secure partnership. They're both industry leaders, but then you have to say, well, okay, is there a point in between those two? Where things start to go down? Or if you're not doing that, if you're not buying an off-the-shelf partnership, if you're saying this is my CRM and you're trying to buy a new UCaaS or CCaaS provider to integrate with that, how secure is that integration?
Yeah, absolutely. Can that data be, interpreted on the way? So yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. I think the security piece and also we have to. I think I've ruined it now because we've nearly done 15 minutes without mentioning AI. But one of the reasons that we have potentially seen this rising demand for security is because more and more businesses are looking at AI to improve efficiency and productivity. That's what the research says that businesses are trying to do with AI. So there's more and more focus on aligning their data, making sure that data is sort of readable and in the right place. But the more they focus on that data, the more they think, oh, actually, is this data secure? Whether it's customer data or it's internal business data, whatever that is. I think it's that sort of focus on data as an enabler for efficiency and productivity gains increases the focus on data security almost hand in hand, that the two can't be separated.
Exactly. And if you are using AI as an external line or chatbot or something like that, you do create a new attack vector for yourself with prompt injection, disclosure of information, all those kind of things. And I mean, the number of calls we've been on even the last sort of 3-4 months that had just so much emphasis on guardrails, protection against all of those kind of things, so all of these new systems being added are just increasing that focus on security. And to an extent, it's first people figure out what they can do and what's fun and what's interesting, and then they figure out how to do it in a secure and efficient manner. And we're kind of entering that phase, I think, this year where there will be a lot of practical AI deployments, both on the back end and potentially on the front end as well. And then how to make those secure is going to be the thing.
And I know it's something that you've looked at a lot in terms of one of the main concerns of businesses is often and this from your networking background, Finbarr, the weakest piece within any network is the soft, squishy human bit in terms of security. So, and one of the main concerns of businesses is, employees using AI improperly. If you don't have the capabilities and systems internally, if you don't necessarily deploy a co-pilot or an AI assistant, and an employee thinks, oh, I can just use this non-certain. They could be potentially putting, sensitive business data somewhere they shouldn't be. So I think there's lots of things, and there's going to have to be lots of focus on, employee education around, how are you using these tools? Are they sanctioned by your business? What data are you allowed to put into, something to help you with a particular project, that sort of thing. So there's the soft, squishy human bit is a key potential weakness there.
And as a bit of a hot take, right, tied into that, in terms of, is a bonus prediction, right, for anyone still listening, the bonus prediction, I am personally of the opinion, and I think Patrick might disagree with me, that the AGI ChatGPT usage is going to fall off a cliff this year, right? And I'm going to say this for two reasons. The first reason is I am just completely unsure how long these companies are going to be willing to maintain this as a free service. Right.
Yeah.
Let's put that out there first, right? At the moment, you can just log into the website, you can do something, but we know on the back end how much that costs in terms of electricity, water, and the effect that that's having on ESG programs and sustainability programs, right? So I have a feeling that ChatGPT and Gemini and all of those people are going to start to cut down on the amount of free users that are allowed to query, right? Which will drastically reduce. And I think on the other side of things, from the business perspective, I think that awareness of what is this actually doing, where's it actually going, and how do we trust what's coming out is rising so highly that businesses are going to start saying no to people using it casually. And they're either going to buy a license or they're going to do what we're seeing a lot of people do, which is deploy a much more limited version of that approach. Like, for example, our Copilot we use with Teams. The majority of the time, the first source that it draws from is our internal documents, because those are trusted. Those are written by us, created, and it can reference exactly where they are. It only goes to the internet to ask for a query if you tell it to, or if it can't find something internally first. And a lot of companies are going to feel very comfortable with that in a way that they wouldn't feel comfortable with something like ChatGPT, especially if it starts to cost money or if it starts to be something they have to pay for. So that's my hot prediction, is that I think the usage of those free tools is.
Yeah. You and I were talking about this yesterday, and I don't completely disagree. And that cost transparency thing is really interesting, because I think the more and more we see, and you mentioned cost outside of just the financial things in terms of sort of environmental factors, I think that is going to be really interesting as these are used more and more and more. And maybe for more and more mundane inquiries that aren't particularly, if we become more and more reliant on these systems, the costs are going to, as we become more familiar and more and more people, costs are going to accelerate. So how feasible is that going to be going forward? So it's something that we've been looking at for a while, of the commercial models around, how UC and CC companies are selling their AI capabilities. And you're right. I think that there is potentially going to have to be some sort of reconciling there.
Well, the easiest way to think about it is that for the last 2 years or 1 year, we've been in the marketing phase of these ChatGPT-like systems, right? Where they have been happy to pick up the bill because there was a marketing benefit for everyone being able to use it, experiment with it. You use ChatGPT at home, and then you think, hey, I could have this at work. And then you go to work and you say, hey, get me a pro license. That phase has to end, because we know the back end costs are not cheap in terms of water, electricity, data center capacity. ChatGPT is not willing to maintain that forever. Microsoft isn't, Google isn't. So the real question is, how do they monetize it? Are they going to be able to sustain it with ad revenue? Probably not. So they're going to ask for more paid user licenses. And they're going to be hoping that a lot of businesses that are getting use out of this are going to start putting it in their pocket. But the second that you start asking a business to pay, that's the second you have to start rationalizing how it's being used, why it's being used. I mean, not everyone at our company has a Copilot license, for example.
No, absolutely.
Because we're testing it on the subset that we think has the most benefit from it.
Yeah, I think that ROI calculation, and I've seen some studies about it, but I think that it is complex to do. If you apply a relatively generic AI assistance tool, whether we're calling that Copilot because that's what Microsoft have called it, across users in your business, I think measuring the ROI is going to be difficult. The true ROI and whether it's really worth it from the sort of current cost points.
Yeah. And the thing that does worry me for a lot of businesses, especially on the smaller to medium end, is that you can, and that this is the traditional pattern with these technology companies, view what's happening now as the spearhead, where they're giving it to you for free, they're giving it to you for cheap. Everyone's getting used to relying on it, and then they're going to apply the cost, then they're going to put in the gate, and then you're going to have to either get your employees not to use it or pay for it. And I think there will be a crunch point happening at some point this year where that cost is going to start being passed back to the companies. And a lot of them are going to have a bit of a shock when they find out how much these AI services that they've been talking about using are actually costing them. And I know I kind of want that. I kind of have an idea that discussion, it'd be better if it happened sooner. And I'm quite happy. This has gone into a whole AI discussion, but one of the reasons I actually quite like Copilot is that it was never free and it came with a pretty clear license cost from the start.
And a relatively substantial license cost, considering Microsoft's other license pricings. It's a substantial cost. It was never, a freemium product.
But I like the transparency of that because it's never really been free. And I think that discussion of how much it costs and how these companies that actually make these systems are going to get their money will happen this year. So there you go. Well, you've had our comms prediction. You've had our CX prediction, both, Patrick talking about the interaction between on-prem and hybrid and the continued growth of cloud, but the awareness that on-prem is actually still fitting in for certain use cases. You've had me talking about how I think 2025 is going to be a very important moment for security with the whole interaction of AI and fraud coming into the communications marketplace. There's something I didn't talk about, which is what happens when people have AI assistants that they want to talk to companies for them, but the AI assistants sound like they're trying to commit fraud. But that's a discussion for another podcast. And then we had a whole discussion about the actual cost of AI and how that's going to come to a head in 2025 with companies being asked to put their hand in their pockets to pay for these smart systems that they have been getting essentially for free or hugely undercosted discounts for the last year. And those discounts can't continue. I think that's been a pretty good episode. Patrick, do you have any last thoughts to send us away?
No, just a happy new year to everyone for 2025, and look forward to catching up with the entire Cavell community throughout the year and looking at some exciting research. And hopefully, we never have to revisit these in 2025. So if in 2026, so if the predictions don't come true, we'll never be held to account.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so that's it from us. If you want to meet us in person, I think the next events we obviously have our Cavell Europe Summit in March, so do come along to that, have a look. It has a CX Summit as part of that event as a separate afternoon, but also join together. So come and join for that. In terms of other event schedules, I may be in Berlin shortly for CCW Berlin. So you want to meet at the show, just let me know. Patrick, do you have any upcoming travel you'd like to let people know about?
No, in terms of public events, it'll probably be the first big one on the calendar. I'd have thought would be Enterprise Connect. But I really encourage, before then, as you mentioned, the Cavell Summit Europe, which will be on the 12th of March in London. So if anyone's interested and attended, as Finbarr said, we'll be launching our first CX Summit in conjunction with that. Please do get in touch and we can provide some extra details at the event. Should be great.
Brilliant. And if you want to talk to us about any of the ideas in this podcast, please do just get in touch. You'll find contact details on the Cavell website or get in touch through LinkedIn. We're always happy to expand on any of these ideas further. And of course, we do like to ramble and talk in this podcast, but we also have a lot of data that backs up the points that we've made. So if you want to see it, well, it's available for a perfectly reasonable fee. Speak to you all soon.
Bye, everyone.